Welcome, my name is Michal Matrone. I'm the Associate Director of the Office of Career and Professional Development. And this is our March Alumni Career Paths session, which is part of the Every Month series. If you're new to knowing what that series is, it is, as the name implies, every month we feature a different career path for those with a PhD. So we focus on non-faculty careers with PhDs. I do want to acknowledge and just thank you all for showing up. Today has been another challenging day in the US where there's more racial violence in the US. I'm sure all heard about what is going on or what went on in Atlanta. So just know that we are recording this. So if you feel that you are not capable of continuing on, you want to take care of yourself, you will be able to see this recording online later on our website. But if you are here because this is a great distraction, then welcome. We hope that you learn a lot about what careers in consulting look like and hopefully connect with those who do them right now. So because of weather and family emergencies, our panel of 5 has, I think, reduced to a panel of 2 and hopefully 3 people. I'm not sure if Aaron has joined us yet, but we're joined at the moment by JD Mclaurin, who's a consultant at ZS. He's an alum of UCSF and the Biochemistry and Molecular Biology program, and Deb Dauber, who is a consultant at her own consulting company, Dauber Consulting, and she's an alum of the Chemistry and Chemical Biology program. Karen Hill, unfortunately, had a family emergency, so she is not able to join us today, but is happy to connect with those who may be interested in following a career path like hers. She's an alum of the nursing program here at UCSF. And unfortunately, due to weather in the New Orleans area in Louisiana, Etosha is not able to connect. So she's going to try to join when she can, and hopefully she'll be able to join us in a few minutes. So just wanted to go through a few slides of, starting with, why we're here. So why do we bring you these types of programs? First is that we want you to identify that all career paths for PhDs are considered successful ones. Having done this for a while, I think it's still a stigma that if you're not pursuing a faculty career, that it's not a successful career, and that is not the case. So we want you to see that there are many options that you can pursue with the PhD, and this is just one of them, consulting careers. We also want you to see and know that representation matters, and that you will see and identify with someone who has followed this career, and that you'll be easily connect with them because this is we've done the networking for you. And it kind of lowers the barrier to reach out to someone that you don't know. And so by seeing them here today, you know that they are someone willing to help and to talk to you in an informational interview or otherwise. So that's why we bring these types of programs to you at UCSF. Just know that this is not a single office endeavor. This is a collaboration between many different units at UCSF and beyond UCSF. So I'm very excited that all of us have come together. So Alumni Career Paths is a collaboration with Black Excellence in STEM, with my office, OCPD, Office of Career and Professional Development, Alumni Affairs, and it really started prior to any of this existing by a graduate student-led program called the PhD Alumni Career Series, which Snow Nang and Lindsay Asmiri has led for quite a while, for a number of years, at least since I've been here. And for months like this, when we feature consulting, we also collaborate strongly with our consulting club at UCSF. And so if you have questions about that, Capriya Rinaldi is here to answer and to tell you about it should you have a question about joining the consulting club. I just want to thank all of these wonderful humans that have made it possible. They're here on video today, so we don't have a lot of time to go through them and have them introduce themselves, but know that Jocelyn, Trish, Rachel, Sarah, and Mike from OCPD have helped make this possible. Obviously, Jasmine King from Black Excellence in STEM, who's also a graduate student. Lindsay and Snow, who were kind of the originators of programmings like this with Alumni Career Series. And of course, Katie, who is here from Alumni Affairs. So just so you all know what is going to be the run of show today. We're going to start with some introduction to UCSF Connect. So for those of you at UCSF who may not know what that is, we'll have a short overview about it. Quick little demo so you know how to get into it, and search for those who are pursuing consulting careers. And then we'll ask for our panelists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their career story. We'll have some time for moderated Q&A, and then we'll be open for audience Q&A at the end. So with that, I do want to say, let's start with UCSF Connect. And this is just my slide. I will hand it over to Katie or Sarah, who would talk about how to get into it. So one great thing is that the Alumni Career Paths is a group within UCSF. And so with that, Katie, could you tell us more about the program and how it works? And I'll stop sharing and turn it over to you.
Mike. Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Katie and I work in the alumni office, and with Sarah, who's in the Office of Career and Professional Development, we administer the UCSF Connect online networking community. And UCSF Connect, it's like LinkedIn, but just for UCSF. So everyone who's admitted and joins the community has chosen to be a part of it, and that they are, alumni, current students, current residents, postdocs, fellows, faculty, staff, or are alumni of any of those programs. I'm going to do just a real quick demo to show you. First, let me put in the chat. This is the website, ucsfconnect.com. And then let me share my screen here so you can see inside UCSF Connect. It looks a lot like any sort of social media thing. There's a feed where people will post updates and information. There are groups. One of those groups is Alumni Career Paths, where we invite our panelists as well as the team to join, and we invite you as the audience to join this. And this is where you'll be able to find us and be able to message us. And also be able to find materials. Like I'm about to give you some tips on how to search for consultants. I've created a document with those tips here, and you can find and view that document here. We'll also have recordings of today's recording will be posted here, so you can come back and find it. But let me so please be sure to join UCSF Connect. Join this particular group. But let me dig into the directory really quick to show you how, if you're looking for consultants, there's a few different ways that you can do that. First is right up here in the keyword search. We want to see who has the word, if I knew how to spell it, consultant somewhere in their profile. And we have 148 users who do. Now, how would you begin to narrow that down? Perhaps you do want to say who has a degree, a degreed alum, 103 of them. Perhaps you want to look up someone who has a PhD. There we get down to 28. Maybe you want to look up someone who's in your department and select that. I don't want to narrow it down too much because I want to show you a couple other features. Another way that you might want to look up is going down here into work experience. One, you could type in a company name. I know JD's at ZS Associates. And here we found one of our speakers. We could go into his profile, take a look at what his experience is and message him through the community here. Very easy. Let me show you one other feature. If I am not sure about what companies are out there, here I can look under industry, and look under industry. Some of our users have noted that management consulting is the industry they work in. We have 8 of those users who are also alumni. Let me uncheck the alumni, see how that might expand out. Expands out to 9. And also, I think industry is probably the one to look, but you can also look here at job function and see who's clicked consultant. And we have 6 users here. So you can start maybe with looking at the people who have clicked industry and job function. But I think too, also being able to look at who has that word consultant in their profile is something that might expand your search. So play around with the search, try some different things to find people. Look into different profiles. It doesn't have to be that first profile you look at might not be the right one, but so don't get discouraged. Poke around, look at some different profiles, and don't hesitate to message someone. And in that PDF that I shared with you, there's a link to a great article that Sarah Yazzie wrote on how to write that first introductory email and ask for an informational interview. And so after today, when you're inspired hearing from our alumni and want to talk to more alumni, use UCSF as a place to find those connections. So I'll stop there and let you get to it.
Thank you so much, Katie. Greatly appreciate it. So just keep in mind that UCSF Connect is free to join, and you can actually sign up for it through your MyAccess email or your MyAccess credentials, should you be at UCSF. So with that, we now have 4 out of our 5 panelists, so I'm excited to welcome them all. And just to introduce them or have them introduce themselves, we'll start out with our first question, and that is, please, all 4 of you, introduce yourselves and tell us your career story, starting from, for 3 of you, from when you were at UCSF to kind of what were the decisions you made to pursue and now be a consultant. Kind of tell us a little bit about what you do. And Etosha, similar, tell us about your experience from your degree through where to where you are now. So with that, why don't we I'm just gonna go with, why don't we start with JD? Merely because you were the first one to join us today, so.
Got it. Great. Well, thanks, I guess, first off, for having me on your panel. Good to see, I guess I'm not really back, but good to kind of be back at UCSF. So my name is JD. I was a graduate student at UCSF in the Tetrad program in Orion Weiner's lab, graduated in 2018. And I think to sort of answer the question, like I left UCSF in 2018, came to ZS straight away. I've been there for, I guess, since 2018, right? So for 2.5 years or so. And yeah, I think just looking at this question again, probably like a lot of you are doing right now, I spent a lot of time midway through grad school thinking about what I wanted to do next, and did a lot of informational interviews, was sort of, I would say, almost like a poster child of the MIND program, did huge number of informational interviews, did a number of different programs put on by OCPD, that sort of thing, landing on consulting. That's sort of me in a nutshell.
Thank you, JD. Deb, why don't you were the second to join. Could you give us your career story?
Yeah, mine's a little more meandering. So I graduated from UCSF in 2001, back in what I'm now thinking of as the dark ages, before there was a whole lot of, the entire career center when I was there was Build Instat, and that was it. So all the MIND program and GCICE and everything that's been built up since then was not available to me at the time. So I didn't really know what I was looking for. I wanted to find a job where I could contribute and learn at the same time, and that naturally took me to consulting. My first job out of school was with a tiny little consulting firm that doesn't exist anymore. I think it was a 8-person firm, 12-person firm, totally focused on life sciences, where we did qualitative market research and market assessments. And it was a fantastic learning opportunity. I felt like I was being paid to be in college. Like, I was learning all the time. All I had to do was process things out and write a report. It was an amazing opportunity. And I was there for about 3 years, at which point I felt like I had learned what I was there to learn. It was time to move on. And conveniently for me, one of our clients was Genentech, which was my ideal next employer. And they knew me and I knew them. So I had a very easy interview process. Long and drawn out, but they, we all already knew we liked each other. So it was easier than the first job. And I ended up at Genentech. At that point, I moved into competitive intelligence, which is what I've been doing ever since. which I can describe more later if you want. But was at Genentech for about 5 years. I started as an individual contributor. I worked my way up for the last couple of years. I was leading the CI group. I led the CI group through an acquisition. And around then, I started looking at other options. I wasn't really wanting my boss's job. So I was looking laterally and looking to see what other jobs might I be interested in. And I kind of thought maybe I want to go back and study public health. Maybe I want to get more into like helping people get access to care. And then one fateful day, I remember so clearly. I was driving home from work, and in my mind, I thought, well, if I went out on my own and I charged like a reasonable hourly rate, not how much money could I make, but how few hours would I have to work to pay my bills? And it was a shockingly low number. And I was like, oh, I'm going to cut back on my extravagant lifestyle and work part-time for myself. That sounds great. So that was about 10 years ago. I started doing that. I took a couple of years in the middle to go back and get my master's in public health at Berkeley, which was super fun. And if people are interested, I could talk more about that. It gave me more context. I thought I was going to move into a more healthcare side of things, but in the end, I decided that I didn't want to start back at square one in an entry-level position. I was used to earning more money than that at that point, to be totally honest. And so I kept consulting. I love it. What I was missing with the consulting, and I'll get into this a little, it's a little bit lonely working for yourself, but also I was missing how do I contribute to society? You don't really contribute to society as a solo consultant sitting in your home office all day. So post my master's in public health, I've gotten more involved with nonprofits and philanthropy and stuff. I don't get paid for that. So I have like my work that I do to earn my money and pay my bills, and my work that I do, that's my passion. So I've been able to build a more balanced life. But that's my whole meandering path. I still work for myself and plan to for the foreseeable future. So that's as short as I can get my journey to be today.
Thank you so much, Deb. Aaron, would you mind going next?
Yeah, sure thing. So my journey is not as long or exciting as Deb's, so sorry about that. But I was at UCSF until 2018. I was in the PSPG program in Frank Stoka's lab. And coming into grad school or UCSF in general, I know I wanted to be part of biotech. I didn't know what consulting was, to be quite honest, but people in my lab a few years ahead of me went into consulting, so kind of learning through them, watch them do case prep in the break room or talk about consulting or investing. And so that got me interested in kind of that field and learning more about it. And so, I wanted to kind of continue like a lab legacy, if you will, of no one going to a postdoc and doing something else instead. And so I've been at Putnam Associates for about 2.5 years now. We do a mix of qualitative and quantitative research with doctors as well as for payers. And yeah, for us, we're kind of involved in all parts of it. So that includes making the research guide, conducting the interviews themselves, doing the analysis, and then synthesizing information for the pharma clients.
Thank you, Aaron. And last but certainly not least, Etosha.
Hi, everyone. So I studied at the University of Louisiana in Lafayette, Louisiana, and I knew I always wanted to be in the healthcare space. Initially, I started my degree in health information management and realized that maybe it wasn't the path for me, and ended up finishing with a degree in insurance and risk management. And straight out of undergrad, I started working at Ochsner Health System, which is a multi-specialty hospital system based in New Orleans. And I was there working my way up through their revenue integrity department and kind of hit a ceiling of I couldn't be promoted unless I went and got a master's degree. And so I actually started a master's in healthcare administration program at the University of New Orleans. And was feeling really frustrated and uninspired. I was doing that in the evenings in addition to working full time. I wasn't really in the program because I wanted to be. I kind of felt like I was forced to do that. And so I began to explore other career options because I felt essentially saying, even though you're doing the work, we're not going to promote you unless you had this degree was somewhat unfair. And so and looking at other career opportunities is when I saw consulting as an option. Huron Consulting Group was the firm that I started with. And at the time, their primary model for hiring consultants was recruiting from college campuses, but they were looking to sort of diversify their healthcare team and recruit people out of industry. And so that's how I first got into consulting, was being recruited from my role on the provider side into a large consulting firm. From there, I was with Huron for about a year and sort of realized that while I enjoyed consulting, I didn't necessarily enjoy it in such a large corporate environment. We were a huge team. Huron's healthcare practice covers front-end functions for healthcare providers, so registration, scheduling, that sort of thing, back-end billing aspect, and then what they call the middle revenue cycle, which was the team that I was on. And I was on a team that did strategic pricing engagements, and that was all I did. So I went from being on the industry side, where in my role at Auctioneer, I got to touch lots of different things and work on lots of different things, to being in consulting, where while I was being compensated much better than I was in industry, I was feeling really stagnated and kind of uninspired in the work that I was doing. And so that's when I decided to strike out on my own and began consulting as an independent contractor. I did that for a year before actually creating my own LLC and forming my own small boutique consulting firm. So I work alongside my mother, who also has a healthcare background, and the two of us together have McGee & Associates, which is a boutique firm that works on primarily revenue cycle and compliance work for hospitals and physicians. I also am a partner in another small firm, Hospital Pricing Specialist, that's based out of Los Gatos, California. And what we focus on in that arena is more so healthcare data analytics. So in recent times, there's been new regulations around pricing transparency and that sort of thing for hospitals. And so we've built some solutions for creating patient price estimates, as well as publishing charge master data for our client hospitals. And that's how I spend my days today.
Well, thank you to all four of you. Welcome again. We're very excited to have you there, to have you here. It's kind of a first for OCPD, where we've had many people who have come in and talk about their more corporate experiences in consulting, but now we'll have a variety of those who do corporate consulting, but also struck out on their own, as you said, Etosha. So I know I get questions about both in my own one-on-one, so I'm really happy that we're going to hear about all these perspectives today. I'm also happy that both Jasmine and Jocelyn are going to help moderate this. So Jasmine, would you like to take our next question?
Yes. So we have all of the very unique stories we have here. So for this next question, I'm sure we'll get a lot of perspectives, and this will be a two-part question, and it'll be a free-for-all. So whoever feels like they want to answer it, take it away. So first, can you speak about navigating company, client, and or field spaces while holding the identity that you hold? And what major challenges did you or do you face? And what can those entering this space expect?
I will go. This is Etosha. So I think in general, what's always challenging, at least for me in the space that I work in, so I really focus on the world of revenue cycle, primarily billing, medical coding, where a lot of the staff are, like me, women, but most of the executive leadership are men. And so it can be sometimes challenging coming in a consulting role where a higher level executive has maybe brought you in to make some changes, and the management that you're dealing with, it can be sometimes a little adversarial, because they may feel that you're coming in to second guess them, or to sort of point out what they're doing wrong, or take their job, or that sort of thing. And that can be compounded by being a woman, being a Black woman, and sort of having to deal with people who by default will feel that they may have some superiority to me just based off of their race or gender. That can also be, particularly tricky to navigate. I'm from the South, and so a lot of times working with smaller hospitals down in the South, you still get some culture that I think most of us would be pretty shocked about in a corporate setting. People calling you sweetie and darling when you're really, there to do a job and to uphold a professional standard. So that can be challenging as a woman, and again, as a Black woman, moving in those spaces when you're dealing with people who maybe have a mindset that isn't quite in line with what you might see in corporate settings in much larger cities or more progressive environments.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Could we have one more person take that question before we move on to the other?
Yeah, one thing I was thinking, probably one identity that the majority of us on this call share is that we're scientists, right? And coming into consulting, at least for me at ZS, the majority of my peers and colleagues and clients are not scientists, right? And so working on, I at least at the gate did a lot of work supporting clients who worked in business development and licensing and kind of early portfolio management and things like that. Where it's to your benefit to know a little bit about the science and about competitors' products and how they work and things of that nature. But in the end, that's not the thing that people care about the most. And it was a little bit of not a shock, but a mindset shift for me, just in having informal conversations with people about things, right? That's not challenging. It's just sort of something you have to sort of get used to, right? You can sort of do your projects and be effective and what have you, but you're sort of dealing with a different type of folk, if you will. As I've kind of gone on at ZS and gotten more experience and things of that nature, kind of being the odd person out, having a scientific background is sort of positioned me, I think, a little bit differently in our office than other people, where I have a lot of people now these days who sort of recognize, hey, I need to get up to speed on something really quickly. Who are the people who I can just have like a quick 10-minute conversation with to sort of get the lay of the land in terms of, like how do products in this market, work, right? And there are tons of people who depend on me for that kind of therapeutic area expertise, scientific expertise in our office, and will point other people in my direction to kind of get that type of onboarding. Just sort of a different, I think, kind of identity that I maybe as a student at UCSF didn't consider being a scientist a big part of my identity, but it has become sort of a major part of my identity now in consulting.
Great. Thank you for sharing, JD. Jocelyn, could you take away the next question?
Yep. All right. Thank you so much. This is enlightening. So for the next question, we, as students, sometimes don't necessarily know what gets you to the position that you're aspiring to. So we would like to ask you what has been the most critical either moment of action in getting you to where you are right now. And that is, anyone can take the question.
I'll try to take a stab at this one. So I think it's a good question. I was thinking about this. I think that what's been most pivotal for me is that I have jumped at, possibly maybe too much, jumped at every opportunity and taken lots of risks. I always had a backup plan. So I always had a, like, if this doesn't work out, what am I going to do instead? But I've always, when I was at Genentech, if someone went on maternity leave and I was asked to cover for them, I would say yes. If there's a special project, I would say yes. So just every new opportunity, I took it. And that has really opened a lot of, both it gets you connected with people you wouldn't be working with otherwise, and opens doors and gives you a chance to kind of try on other jobs, whether you're a consultant or in an industry role. Either way, I have always found saying yes to new opportunities has always really paid off. And then I'll just add, back when I was in graduate school, I had started something which I'm sure no longer exists called CCB chats, where I took it as like my personal opportunity to learn about alternative careers. And we had Kayvon Shokat, who at the time was a brand new professor just hired. And someone asked him about, what's your strategy in picking a postdoc? Should you, go deep or should you go broad? And he said, my experience is if you always go for the option that seems most exciting for you, you'll be happy with where you end up. And I have kind of used that as my guiding principle in career decisions ever since then. I always go for the most fun, exciting sounding position. So that's how I got where I ended up. And it's also why my path is not linear.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I can share as well. So I guess for me, it's probably having maybe a network of people that were also interested in doing the same thing. So in this case was consulting. And so it started with people in my lab who first kind of showed me what it was or what the ropes were, how do you do it. Then expanded people in my program, people outside my program, UCSF, even like friends from elementary school who are going to consulting as well. There's people you can share cases with, you can share resources with, you can share preparation, even you can share where to apply as well. I mean, the bigger firms, but also a lot of smaller firms as well you may not know about or how to navigate that process. And so having people who are doing the same thing, I think was really instrumental for me kind of learning how to do it and learning how to execute and ultimately, getting the job offer in consulting itself.
Excellent. Anyone else before we move on to the next question? All right. So for the next question, Mike, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jocelyn. So the next question is related to what your values are, what your values were and what they are now. And by values, I mean, what gave your work meaning, what was important to you when you were a student, versus where you are today. So to actually ask the question, so as a student, what were your values, and were your values met by your first role out of graduate school or your, and then if they were not, what are your values not? Or what are your values now, excuse me. And I'm gonna say, JD, I'm gonna point to you as our first one. I feel now that I'm picking on you, sorry.
I'm kind of laughing because I as a grad student, to some degree now, was very dogmatic about these types of things, and like actually had, if you visited my lab bench, I had a picture of Craig Venter above my lab bench, and I sort of, had three, I think, probably main values. Number one, move fast. Number two, do cool stuff. Number three, be willing to change your mind, right? And I like wrote these things down, and I'd say I still very much so believe in those three things. And as a consultant, I think that those three things are pretty pivotal to executing on type of projects that I work on. Typically involve having pretty tight timelines, needing to make a decision about something faster than is comfortable, probably for you or for your client, but is necessary so that the business can move forward and your client can move forward. And so, I'd say all those boxes for me are checked in my role now.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Etosha, as having a different background and perspective from, and now in the consulting world, what were your values? What was important to you in your work when you started, and where are they now?
Oh, wow. I think as a student, I was really focused on career growth. And to me, career growth was measured within a title. I wanted to be a manager by a certain point, a director by a certain point, a VP by a certain point, and getting out into the workforce, both on the provider side, as well as when I was in a corporate consulting environment and that latter was present for me, I realized that wasn't what I wanted my work to be measured by. And that's not what I valued in my professional life. What was important to me was doing new and exciting things, adding value to my industry, and not being stagnated. And I definitely, in a more independent consulting role, I get to fulfill those values each day.
Thank you so much. Aaron, Deb, anything you'd like to add?
Yes. So I was thinking about this question and I try to find my IDP again from UCSF, and I realized I don't have access to the email anymore. So that kind of failed and fell flat. But in thinking about this, I think one value I didn't appreciate was I wanted to feel productive. And so I remember a lot of times in lab, I didn't always feel that productivity, like especially when like you go in on the weekend, you do an experiment, like Sunday night, the experiment fails, and you feel like you could have stayed home and watched TV on the couch and done nothing and been in the same place Monday morning. And like that feeling, I hated that so much, especially when it happened. And so I feel like I wanted to feel like I was more productive, and I wanted to find a career that allowed me to be more productive at least. And so I think that was one thing I tried to look for. In consultant, you definitely get a lot more of that. I mean, there are times when you give a deck to a client and they, tear it up and you have to make changes so you don't feel as productive. But I think overall, if you're a weekend nights waiting for centrifuge or waiting for cells to grow properly, where you feel like you are not as productive. So I'd say that was one thing that was kind of important for me.
Oh my God, Aaron, I'm feeling that so hard. So I'm going to start with, I agree with everything everyone just said. Everything everyone just said applies to me. I especially want to, I'm with Etosha. When I first started out, if you asked me what my values were my last year of my PhD program, and I did not do a postdoc, I would have told you my values are to get this stuff done and get out of here as fast as I can. So I was just totally focused, and definitely something where I really wanted a job where the amount of output I had was proportional to the amount of work I put in, which was absolutely not true of my research at all. I wanted a job where you work hard, you get stuff done. If you slack off, you don't get stuff done. It just makes sense that way. So I'm not sure I thought in terms of values at that point in my life, I guess is what I'm getting at. And for the first couple jobs in my career, it was all about that, working hard, getting stuff done, being productive, moving up, all the things everyone brought out. And then at some point, I took a shift and realized I was on a fast track to a really boring life. And that at that point, I remembered that in high school, I had this value around balance in my life, taking care of myself, investing in myself personally, as well as my career, which I'd forgotten about along the way. And so I since then have worked to get a lot more balance between my work and my and my personal life. But that's a value that's come into play much more in the last 5-10 years for me.
Thank you to all of you. I appreciate all of your inputs for that. So Jasmine, the floor is yours.
Yes. So since all of you have very different backgrounds in terms of training, what skill set would you say your training provided to you that you use regularly? And second part is, what skills did you need to learn? And we will start with Aaron.
Yeah. So I guess maybe overall, it's like knowing how to do research and find an answer you're looking for relatively quickly, where it's like looking for a protocol, looking for a procedure, looking for the best reagent, and applying synthesized information. I think that's probably used relatively often. We do market research, or you research something and you get a find and synthesize that into some finalized product. I think that is one thing that's been used, very translatable. The thing maybe I had to learn per se is when you synthesize information, when you present something, what's most important. I feel like in grad school itself, like when you present slides or something else, you tell the story first and you build to a conclusion. Whereas oftentimes I feel like in business, you do the conclusion first, then you tell the story afterwards. And a lot of times the conclusion is the first thing, you may not even get into the details itself. Whereas scientists want details forward and summary at the end. I think at least in my experience, business school, it's kind of the reverse of that. So summary first and details if they're curious enough to go, into the appendix, they'll search for that.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, since we have a perspective from a PhD graduate, how about we go to Etosha?
So the skills that I use regularly, that while I didn't get them in my degree program, I did study for, I have a few coding certifications, and it was important to me to do work that allowed me to flex those skills. And so I enjoy that I'm able to do that on a regular basis. But I think the thing that I really had to learn was how to be a business owner. I had a lot of subject matter expertise when I decided, I can go out on my own and do this consulting thing. But what I didn't necessarily understand was acquisition of a project and a lot of the administrative aspect that goes along with it, contracts and, setting up project timelines, understanding that I could be driving this bus and that I didn't necessarily have to take whatever a client was giving me and kind of really having that ownership and not being afraid to flex that muscle was something that, coming out of a more corporate structure, I hadn't had to do for myself. And so really practicing agency was really, really important and a skill that I really did have to develop when I decided to become independent in consulting.
Yeah, thank you for that. JD or Deb, do y'all have anything to add before we move on to the next question?
I think one thing I would add that, and this is thing PhDs, I think are thought of highly for, which is why I'm calling it out, is that the ability to take a project and consult, ask when you need help, but mostly work independently and get stuff done, turns out to be really highly valued. I mean, it's obviously valuable when you work for yourself, like I do, or like Etosha does, but even within a company, bosses really like when they can ask you to do something and you just go off and do it. And if you're not asking any questions, it's because you don't need help. And if you need help, you're going to ask. Like, that simple concept, obvious to a PhD, is surprisingly apparently rare and well appreciated. So that was one skill that I would say I got from a PhD program that really has paid off, really has been valuable.
Perfect. Thank you all. And if you have nothing to add, JD, I will hand it over to Jocelyn.
All right. So for this next question, we would like to know what surprised you the most about working in a non-academic space or field. And
yeah, I guess I can go since I can answer the last question.
Awesome.
I think for me in consulting, I think one of the major things that was surprising to me is just how large of a fraction of the job is really just managing kind of people, not people internally, but your clients. What I mean by that is, in the end, like, you're working with a client like a company, but you're dealing with individuals, right? You got that client, and they have bosses, and they have kind of external priorities, and they're stressed out, and all of that, and just the amount of time that you spend, especially for me right now, just sort of dealing with that aspect of the job and sort of listening to the client sort of vent their frustrations and trying to adapt to how they'll react to what you're working on, not because of what you're doing, but just because of the context around what you're doing. I really didn't have a foundational understanding of how much effort that takes and how big of a part of the job that is.
Thank you for sharing. Aaron, would you like to contribute?
Yeah, I mean, when I saw this question, the first thing that came to mind is like having to pay for research papers. It's a smaller one, but when you're in grad school, they're all free and you can get all of them anytime you want. And then all of a sudden you want to look something up. It's like, oh, it's a paywall. What do I do now? That's more of a smaller one. But I think maybe something else is that we do a lot of, team-based projects. In consulting, you work in small teams, so normally 3 or 4 people all the time. And I didn't realize just how much teams are involved in everything that you do. Like, especially compared to grad school, most projects are by yourself. Maybe it's like a postdoc on a project, another graduate student, but it's mostly self-driven. Whereas now everything was very much team-focused. And sometimes you don't have to do everything, which is a kind of a weird feeling sometimes as well, whereas someone else is more responsible for that for you. So right now, I'm at a client side, I'm looking for a number, looking at myself, I just ask the person whose job is to do that, and they can help me with that. Whereas I'm used to that's going to be my thing to do, my domain, but things are more split and divided and somewhat siloed in that sense. So it's kind of knowing that team focus, and second part of like knowing that you don't have to do everything or know everything, that someone else can help you out. That's been kind of a surprising and a nice change, if you will.
Great. Thank you. Deb and Etosha, if you have anything to add, feel free.
I do, but I'm waiting to see if Etosha wants to jump in. All right, I'll jump in and then you go after me.
Okay.
I was, when I was in academia and I wanted to leave, and everyone said, oh, it won't be as intellectually stimulating for you, the work, and the people won't be quite as smart as what you're used to. And what surprised me is the people I work with are just as smart as my friends and colleagues from UCSF. And the work, if anything, is a little more intellectually stimulating because I don't have to wait for my PCR to run or my cells to grow or my cells to spin down or whatever I was doing. I mean, grad school, I thought like my bench research was like 10% thinking and 90% doing. And the work I do now, if you're in market research or market assessment, it's like I said, it used to be like computational research. Like you're always thinking, you're always gathering data or evaluating it, or working with clients and trying to figure out how to get them to see their blind spots or whatever it is. It's constant intellectual stimulation. So I was actually really surprised by how engaged I could stay outside of academia. Pleasantly surprised.
Thank you for sharing. I don't know if Etosha has anything else to say, but
Yeah,
if not,
I didn't do my doctorate, so being, I think, in that level of academic space, I haven't experienced. So I don't know if I really have much to add on this one.
Okay.
And that's
Thank
okay,
you.
because the next question is for you and Deb, actually. So, and that is related to, as business owners and starting your own business, what was the most challenging thing that you faced in that process, or even running it as you do now? And then the second part being, what advice do you have for someone who wants to do what you have done?
The biggest challenge, taxes. Get a CPA would be my number one bit of advice. But one of the things that my mom always used to tell me about being in healthcare as an industry was, healthcare is really small, and the same people that you meet, you'll meet again. And I kind of thought, that's so weird. That's just not the case. Like that's not going to happen. But I've had the opportunity to work all across the country, and so many people that, I encounter them on a project in Connecticut, and then I turn around and I encounter them on a project I'm working on in Washington. And it's happened multiple times, and it shouldn't surprise me every time it happens, but it still does. And it really reinforces for me the importance of really cultivating relationships. One, because as someone who is independent, I don't have necessarily a bench of people working with me that I can be, well, tell me your opinion on this or tell me your that. So having college respect with, depth of knowledge that you can reach out to is such an asset when you're working as an independent consultant, but also knowing that you never know when your path will cross with someone again. And so making sure that you're always really cultivating good relationships with people, because it's very important. All the work that I've done through my firm, I've gotten through referral. I don't have a website. I don't advertise anywhere. So the number one thing I've done in order to ensure the success of my business has been cultivating good relationships.
Thanks, Natasha. Deb.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So the thing that surprised me the most, I'm going to make 2 points, and they're both tangentially like a follow on from what Natasha just said. What surprised me the most is that, and I work for myself, so most of my work is done sitting at this desk, on the internet, whether COVID or not. Like, you all have been living my lifestyle for the last year. I've been doing it for 10 years. And what everyone learned in the last year is it gets really lonely and you have mental health issues when you're sitting at your desk all day. So if anything, this past year has validated my issues a little bit as I watch everyone else go through it. So keeping yourself socialized is a real challenge when you work for yourself. That's kind of what surprised me the most. The other piece didn't so much surprise me, but I got very lucky, and I a little bit planned it. And if I hadn't done it this way, it would have been a problem. But Genentech was required by Roche, and I left. None of us were all that. Well, many of us were not that happy about the acquisition. I left 1 month after I got my retention bonus a year later. And then I took a couple of months off. And by the time I got my head up and was ready to start consulting, half of my colleagues from Genentech had also left Genentech, and they had all gone to different companies from each other. So I had this natural set of connections to reach out to for my business development. And like Etosha, every project I've ever done for 10 years has been either someone I know personally from, sorry, I apologize. There's a dog behind me, so you might see her ears. I'm sorry. But every project I've done has either been a Genentech colleague or like 1 degree of separation. Even after 10 years, it's all within 1 degree of separation from someone I was working at there. So I would say if you do want to go out on your own, either have know who your network is and have a plan for how you're going to work your network, or have a plan for cold selling is much harder than, people who know you and trust you. It's not that hard to sell work. I mean, Etosha, I'm curious to see if you agree, but people who don't know you from Adam, that's much, much harder. And so if you don't have that network built in, definitely have a plan for how you're going to do sales and marketing, because I would not enjoy what I do nearly as much if I had to bust my butt making connections with people who don't know me. Be much harder.
I 100% agree with that. And that was also one of the things that in corporate consulting world, the advancement from associate to manager and upwards meant additional sales within the role. And I never fancied myself a salesperson. So I knew that even in a large consulting firm, there was a level of ceiling for me. So the idea of like having a cold call and go out there and seek work in that manner was definitely something that I knew wasn't really a strength of mine. So I was either figuring out how to partner with someone who that was their strength, or making sure I had cultivated those connections that I didn't necessarily need to have a strong sales muscle, that my work was able to speak for itself. And I would just add that when someone is familiar with what you do, it also just makes it a much more pleasurable working experience as well, because they have already an expectation of how you are as a professional, and they're not going to necessarily expect less of you. They're not necessarily going to treat you in a way that you wouldn't be accustomed to or wouldn't be appreciative of. And so I think that's really important when you're talking about working as an independent consultant.
Thank you both so much. I really enjoyed hearing both of your perspectives. And with that, Jasmine, you are next.
Yes. So now that we have heard some perspectives from the business owners, we can kind of shift to JD and Aaron, with the next question being, so we, especially with all the craziness in the world that's going on, we want students and postdocs to be able to identify companies that are equitable and inclusive. So what is the culture of your company?
Yeah, I think I'd say at ZS that diversity and inclusion is something that we take pretty seriously. I'd say the company takes very seriously. Like all companies, probably we have sort of the standard suite of identity-based groups, like women's leadership group, sort of Black, Hispanic alliance type group, things of that nature. But the thing that stood out to me when I first joined ZS was just how at the leadership level, even within our office, we have a number of offices here in the US, I think like 20 some odd offices in the US. There's a real sort of push to ensure from the top down that issues of diversity and inclusion are front and center, and that is reflected in sort of our kind of, here in I work in the San Francisco office. If you look at sort of our office calendar for the last several months, there's a kind of just slew of events and kind of learning sessions and things of that nature, volunteer opportunities that are kind of initiated at the leadership level to sort of push people to reconcile with issues that are unique to different sort of types of folks in our office, be they types of folks with like ethnicity or gender or what have you. And that's something that I recognize takes a lot of time and effort. I'm not sure exactly how our office managing principal does it, but it's something that they invest a lot of time into. The other thing I'll say about that is another thing at ZS that's stricken me is just the number of women that we have in very senior leadership roles, and particularly not just at the partner level, but within the partner layer, there's sort of a kind of unspoken hierarchy. So even among like very senior partners and people who are kind of managing at the highest level of the business, who are women. And that's not something, at least when I was looking around, admittedly at a pretty limited set of firms working in life science that I saw. So certainly something I think that ZS as a firm takes seriously. A lot of strides to make. I could say more about that, but something that I think people invest time in at our company.
Great. I guess I'll follow up with that. So at Putnam, I would say, like, if I have to describe the culture in one word, I think it's maybe adaptable potentially, what I would use. So we're a much smaller firm compared to, say, ZS or some of the other ones. Like the SF office is 15 people, New York and London, I think about 10 people, and then Boston, which is the hub, is about 100 people or so. So it's maybe 150 total across the different sites, so much smaller. I would say that, for the partners in the company, they're receptive to changes, but it really comes from like more of a bottom up, if you will, so grassroots. So, if you have an initiative that you want to push or to enable, I think, you can propose it to the partners and then move on from there. And so they've done a lot, for example, like out for you conferences for recruiting and for retention. And they've done a lot of strides in that one. And there've been pushes for more race based initiatives as well. So, for example, they started to create a position where you can be partially staffed on diversity initiatives internally and partially staffed in the client one. So you can, get paid for time for working on some of the initiatives. So I think, the word I come back to is adaptability and trying to change the environment within a smaller firm and allowing for some of those groups and for inclusivity along that front.
Great, thank you both. And since we are a little short on time, we really want to get to the Q&A. I think we'll move on to the next and final question.
So for this question, we are looking sort of onward from now. How does your current position fit in with your overall career plan? Or do you feel like you are in the best position for you right now? Or is your current position a step on the way to your ultimate career goal? And this is open to all.
I'll go ahead and take this one. So when I first entered the workforce, my career plan really was kind of focused on what's the position that I'm seeking. And one of the things that I really learned in working independently is being really clear about what I want my work to look like, what I want my day to look like, rather than defining my career around a particular position. And even as an independent consultant, there's been times where I've taken on projects that I could do, but I maybe shouldn't do because I had the skills, but it wasn't necessarily something that was inspiring to me or something that I wanted to. But I needed to really understand the difference between this is what I want my day-to-day to look like. This is how I want my work structured. And so now I definitely think after some trial and error, I'm certainly firmly in a place where my day-to-day and the work that I get to do is firmly in line with what I want to be doing. And for me, that is being on the right career path, and that is being in the position that's best for me.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else? Deb?
Tasha, I don't think you can see me. I was laughing while you were talking because that so resonated for me. It's a great question. I revisit this question every couple of years, most recently around mid shelter in place. I was like, maybe I should be working as part of a team. I get lonely. Loneliness drives me to consider, going back into industry or working with a bigger firm. And then I remember that I have built myself a very high, so I agree the workload fits my needs well, but also I built myself a really high quality of life. I'm not a morning person and I don't have to show up for 8 a.m. meetings because I work for myself. I can stop in the middle of the day for an hour to go out to the park with my dog. And I couldn't do this stuff if I worked for someone else. So I think about it every now and then, but the reality is my job meets my needs and gives me a quality of life I just couldn't get if I were working for someone else. So I'm probably more and more convinced that this is pretty much, but I don't hold me to it because I change my mind every couple of years.
I guess I would say for myself in consultant, I always kind of viewed it as like my paid MBA, if you will. Yeah, when I was in grad school, I thought about, do I want to go to MBA if I want to move into business of science? And I couldn't think about doing more school at the time. And I figured consulting was a nice way to get, instead of paying to go to school, to get paid to learn more about business of science. And so for me, I'd always kind of viewed it as transitionary step into forever what's next. I think, I can resonate the fact like when you go hire a consultant, you start to sell business and that part of it, I think it doesn't really appeal to me as much. So I think that hasn't changed in my time so far. I think for me, it's just like building a foundation. This is my pivot into what I want to do next.
Yeah, I'd reiterate what Aaron just said. I think at some point in grad school, I sort of hit the point where I was looking at my PI, Orion, and was sort of like, do I want to be Orion? And the answer was clearly no. And looking at sort of my manager or the partners with whom I work, I almost certainly do not want to be them. And so I think that I'm sort of at the point where I, not in the near term, but at some point need to decide what to do. I'm not actually quite so sure, right? Like I've had some great experiences working with clients and companies at different stages in their life cycle. I'm not sure exactly where I fit in, but I'd say for certain that this is just a kind of stepping stone to something else. And for most people, that's the case, right? Like that's what consulting is.
If I can add half a thought, it's really common for people to, at least within the biopharma industry, really common for people to jump between consulting and industry back and forth. A lot of people go back and forth. On the consulting side, you get the excitement and the new projects coming in all the time and everything's a new experience. And then on the industry side, you get to actually like make your own, consulting, you give a recommendation and God knows what they're going to do with it, right? And people get frustrated with that and say, I'm going to go into industry so I can make decisions and I can be responsible for what comes next and stay with this project for a long time. And then after a couple of years, they're like, yeah, I'm going to go back to the excitement of consulting. So it's super common for people to go back and forth.
Awesome. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for just answering the questions with such transparency, but also a very, like a high level of detail. We appreciate it. So I think
Absolutely.
now is time for the Q&A from our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll remind everybody too that thank you again to all of our panelists, all of them, including Karen, who was unable to join us today, answered a series of just very standard questions that we ask all panelists beforehand so that you have a reference and that we can get into more deeper detail here on our live panels. But those were sent to you prior to our event today, but you also in the future be able to find them online.